All right, so we're checking in with our good friend Ian Begley of ESPN New York. And first of all, Ian, the real reason why we're calling is because we felt like you were on death watch. Are you okay, man, having to cover this team night in, night out? Are you doing all right physically?
I appreciate you guys checking in. I'm hanging in there. I'm day to day like the rest of us.
All right, so the New York Knicks last night pull off a trade, send three guys out, and essentially just clears money space. What was this trade about last night? Give us the update.
Yeah, it was certainly about clearing space. The Knicks got rid of J.R. Smith's $6.4 million player option for next summer. They also got closer to being under the luxury tax, which is only really a benefit for James Dolan. But the real issue here was finding a taker for J.R. Smith to clear off his player option for next summer, opening up some more cap space so you can chase after free agents in the summer of 2015.
So what did the Knicks get back player-wise?
Nothing. This was strictly a salary dump. They did get back a second-round pick in 2019, and they got back a player that they're probably going to keep in Lance Thomas, but Alex Kirk and Lou Amundsen are going to be waived more than likely. So that's one body that they have back. It gives them a couple roster spots open to fill over the next couple of days if they choose to do so. But make no mistake, this wasn't about getting talent back. This was about sending guys out and creating more cap space for this coming summer.
Ian Begley of ESPN New York. Ian, are the Knicks at all surprised that they couldn't get any other better piece for J.R. Smith?
I don't think so. I think it was about finding a taker for JR, and kind of the casualty and all that was having to unload Iman Shumpert and not getting anything in return. I think that's the price they had to pay to get J.R. Smith off the roster. And it's interesting because if you look at past trade discussions involving Iman, they talked with the Nuggets about Kenneth Faried for Iman. They talked to Oklahoma City about a first-rounder. They talked to Phoenix about Jared Dudley. And so that kind of gives you an idea of how other teams valued Iman. But clearly the Knicks didn't get anything back in sending Iman out. So I think their motivation here was, again, to get JR off the books, and sending out Iman for nothing in return was just a part of the transaction.
And the fact that they did it means that they felt like it was the end of the road, that there really was nothing better that they could get for either one of these guys, right?
I think so.
Okay.
I think so. And I think it was about worrying that their trade value was diminishing at this point, and also, as Phil mentioned in his statement last night, just wanting to continue to change the culture of this team and get in guys who are quality locker room guys who are on board with the direction the team's going in. I mean, with JR, he had that player option for next year. You wonder how fully he was as far as being bought into this team. And Iman Shumpert was out the door. They weren't going to re-sign him this summer. So you wonder about how fully he was bought into to the system. So that's part of the motivation here for Phil as well.
Now, why, if you're just going to blow it up and start all over, why do the Carmelo deal? Does this mean that all it's going to be left is Melo and then just completely build around him, or was just Melo desperation?
Well, here's the thing with the notion of blowing it up. That wasn't the idea coming into this season. The idea coming into this season was to compete and for a playoff spot. That's why they made the trade to bring in Jose Calderon. They thought that they were going to be competitive in the East, but as you sit here at 5-32, it's clear that that's not going to happen. So you take the scenario you're in, and you deal with that, and the best option for them was to get rid of these salaries, try to get under luxury tax, because who wants to pay luxury tax on a team that's over 25 games under 500, and to try to create more cap space for this summer, because that's when you're going to have an opportunity to really rebuild the roster with the first-round draft pick that they have and with the money that they'll have available to them to spend in free agency.
Ian Begley of ESPN New York. And Ian, one of the things we've talked about in the show today is with this money that the Knicks are saving, what are the odds that they're going to be able to get one of these big-time free agents that's going to be available this summer?
That's the real challenge for Phil Jackson. He's going to make his money this summer and next summer in free agency. That's why they brought him in. That's why they gave him $60 million. reshape this organization. This is when he's going to have to really put his reputation on the line as an executive. He's going to have to convince guys who are probably coming off of better situations like a Marc Gasol, coming off, and also guys who can make more money by staying with their current teams. He's going to have to convince them to take less money, come to a team that is coming off a horrific season, and kind of put their blind faith in Phil that he's going to get things turned around. So it's going to be a tough sell job for Phil. It's going to be very interesting to see how this thing plays out.
Is there a target out there that you think is mildly realistic to become a Knick in the offseason?
Quite honestly, I don't think that Marc Gasol is coming here. I don't think that any of the bigger names for this summer, be it LaMarcus Aldridge or Rajon Rondo, are going to end up here. Maybe if Kevin Love opts out, doesn't come back to Cleveland, then maybe he's an option. But I really think this summer could be about the second and third tier guys on the market. The Reggie Jacksons, the Wes Matthews, if they were able to pry Jimmy Butler from Chicago. Those are the guys that I think the Knicks are going to go hard after, and they're going to hope that they can convince one of those guys or outbid one of those guys' current teams for their services. I don't think it's realistic for them to bank on getting a Marc Gasol from Memphis at this point. I think you have to look at those second and third tier guys as more realistic targets.
Ian Begley of ESPN New York with Armen and Levack on 104.5 The Team. And Ian, here's my concern. Phil Jackson is 69 years old. In this trade that they did last night, they got a second-round draft pick for 2019. He's going to be 73 or 74 years old at that point. Are you completely convinced that Phil Jackson is happy and comfortable, and is Phil Jackson convinced himself that he's here for the long run in New York to pick up all these little pieces that he's creating in the organization and clean up this mess eventually?
You know what? He's here for 5 years, but I think it'd be foolish for anybody to say that he's going to be here for the life of his contract, because anything can happen. I mean, let's say things don't work out this summer. He gets frustrated. He walks away. He still has made, $24 million, $36 million, depending on the year in his deal that he walks away. So that's a ton of money. So I don't think there's a given at all that he's going to be here for the life of his contract. I think you bring up a good point. If the situation arises and he no longer feels comfortable in his role, I don't think there's anything that's certainly tethering him to James Dolan and the Knicks.
Is there anything that we can look at this and say, Derek Fisher's a good coach, Derek Fisher's a bad coach, or is this just such a mess that we have to wait and see what he really is?
You know what? There are things, if you want to nitpick and say he hasn't done this well, he hasn't done that well, that you can, and you can say, okay, he's contributed to the losses, and it's certainly fair to do that. But I think macro perspective, big picture, I don't think we can judge him on his coaching acumen with the roster he's had, with the injuries that he's dealt with. And certainly he's struggled to find lineups that work. But maybe that's just a sign of there being a mismatched roster and a talent gap every night that the Knicks take the floor. He's also, had a tough time finding rotations at the end of games, consistent rotations. So, again, maybe that's a product of his inability to coach guys effectively. Maybe it's also a product of just not having enough talent. So, I think this is a learning year for Derek Fisher, just as it's a learning year for Phil Jackson. If you want to evaluate him, nitpick him on the things I discussed earlier and maybe his defensive schemes, you can, but I think the fair way to judge him is to wait to see when he gets players in place and to see how he uses those players once he has the talent in place to compete on a night-in and night-out basis. Ian
Begley of ESPN New York with Armen and Levack on 104.5 The Team. Ian, part of the trade last night, part of all of the transactions were the Knicks waived Samuel Dalembert. What's up with the waiving? Was he just not worth anything? I mean, this was a guy they picked up as part of the Tyson Chandler trade, and we were told that he could be a piece as a center in the triangle offense.
Wasn't working out with Sam in the triangle, and, this was just bookkeeping. It was a matter of the Knicks having an opportunity to save $2 million and reduce their luxury tax bill, and that's what they did. I mean, I think if Sam was more effective on the offensive end and was giving them quality minutes, they wouldn't have done it. But you couple the fact of Sam not being super effective and the idea that they wouldn't have to pay $2 million of his $3.8 million had they waived him before tomorrow, and that's why they did what they did.
Does this just put the whipped cream on the top of how bad the Tyson Chandler trade really was?
Yeah, it really doesn't make that Tyson deal look good. Look at what Tyson's doing in Dallas, and look at what the guys who the Knicks brought in are doing for them this year. Jose Calderon's having a subpar year. You just waived Sam Dalembert. Yes, you got the 2 picks in Cleanthony Early and Thanasis Antetokounmpo. You don't know what you have in those 2 guys yet, but certainly as we sit here today, that trade really looks terrible.
The Knicks are 5-32. Last night they lost their 12th in a row to tie a franchise record. Ian Begley, you're on the record. Is this going to be the worst Knicks team we've ever seen in the history of their organization?
Yes. Wins and losses perspective, absolutely. I don't see them winning more than 17 games. It would take a lot for them to get there, and no Knicks team has lost 70 games in franchise history. I think this team is certainly going to threaten that mark. It's going to be ugly the last few months of this season.
Ian, how are they that bad? How are they that bad? There's been terrible teams in Knicks history. How are they this bad?
I need you guys to continue checking in on me periodically to make sure that I'm making it through this season, because it is going to be tough.
Is there any truth to the rumor that Whoopi Goldberg is going to coach the Knicks at some point?
I mean, the team's testing Derek Fisher's sanity, so I would not rule that out at this point. Whoopi may be taking the reins sometime in mid-March.
Ian Begley, he's the best, man. Follow him on Twitter at Ian Begley, ESPNNewYork.com. Ian, always appreciate your time, dude. You the man joining us on such a crazy 24 hours. Thanks so much for your time today.
You got it, guys. Anytime. Thank you for your time, and I'll talk to you soon.